Headline news in Sweden today: Salwan Momika, the Quran burning critic, was shot dead. Welcome to Rick's Robert Spencer, director of Jihad Watch, and with 29 books as well, amongst those The History of Jihad, The Critical Quran, Muhammad, A Critical Biography, Anti-Semitism, History and Myth.
Thank you.
So we were meant to talk about Sweden's proposed measures to address overrepresentation of immigrants in rape statistics. That was the initial idea, as discussed by Integration Minister Mats Persson. But in light of what happened to Salwan Momika, the Islam critic who is known for burning the Quran, he was killed in Sweden, in Södertälje, in his hometown. Could you provide your initial thoughts on that?
It's an outrageous crime that the Swedish government not only did not protect Salwan Momika, but actually put him on trial, especially for the ridiculous charge of stirring up ethnic hatred. Salwan Momika, of course, was from Iraq. He had experience firsthand of the violence and oppression that the Quran can inspire human beings to perpetrate. And he was burning the Quran not so as to stir up racial enmity, but in order to call attention to the aspects of the Quran that are used to destroy the lives of human beings. He was a martyr, he was a hero, and is now a martyr of the freedom of expression, which ought to be a principle that the Swedish government values and upholds. Instead, it is abandoning it and destroying Sweden as a free society in its pursuit of the illusions and fantasies of diversity, multiculturalism, and a society in which there is no alleged racism. The Swedish government ought to be put on trial in the aggregate for the murder of Salwan Momika, and ought to be immediately removed from power by the people of Sweden in order to preserve their culture, their identity, and Sweden's nature as a free society. You may think, oh, this man is insane, and these things not only will not happen, but should not happen, and things will go on as usual. They will not. What will happen as a result of the death of Salwan Momika is more of the same, as jihadis all over the country, and indeed all over Europe, will be emboldened to target other critics of Islam and to take further action against the freedom of expression, knowing that the governments of the various countries of Europe will not protect the defenders of the freedom of expression, but will rather persecute them and try to destroy them themselves. So the jihadis have nothing to worry about. They have a free hand. The death of Salwan Momika, the murder of Salwan Momika, is actually a signpost on the way to the destruction of Sweden and Europe as a whole, and the imposition of Sharia states in Europe.
I suppose you sort of answered it, but can an Islam critic be protected the way things are today?
Well, of course, it's very difficult because of the policies that the Swedish government has pursued in mass migration of Muslims, and no vetting, no attempts to determine, are these people jihadis? How many jihadis are among them? What are the signs that somebody might be a jihadi? They have no idea, and they don't care. They just want to bring in these people to show they're not racist and to, of course, destroy Sweden's cultural and national character because they're socialist internationalists and they want to destroy nation states in general. And so it is extremely difficult, even if the Swedish government decided today that it will now protect other critics of Islam, it will be extremely difficult because of other actions of the same government. But it's also virtually inconceivable because the government is acting in accord with its principles. And consequently, they will not protect critics of Islam even now. They wanted Salwan Momika dead, and they want the other critics of Islam dead.
What are your thoughts on the people who are actually praising this online?
It's perfectly reasonable and understandable that they would do so. They believe that those who criticize Islam ought to be killed. But why, if Sweden is a country that values the freedom of expression, are such people invited to come to Sweden and live? Why are they not encouraged, exhorted, indeed required to adhere to the principles of Swedish society if they're going to live there? Why is the law not enforced when it comes to them? Why is Sweden so eager to throw away its own principles and become something different from what it has been for the last millennium in order to accommodate these people? And so, of course, they're celebrating. What do you expect them to do? They don't value freedom of expression. They hate the freedom of expression, and they're going to destroy it. And the Swedish government is saying, yes, please do. Go ahead.
What are your thoughts on media's role in shaping the public perception around this?
The media is just as criminal because it portrayed Salwan Momika as some kind of a nut and a criminal instead of a hero of the freedom of expression, which is what he was. They did not inculcate in the public any understanding of or appreciation for the freedom of expression. Instead, they encouraged the public to believe that there was something wrong, something unacceptable, something even racist about burning a Quran. Now, burning books has a terrible association because the National Socialists in Germany burned books during World War II. And so nobody really wants to come out and say, burning books, that's a good idea. But in the first place, we have to understand why Salwan Momika was doing it. He was not doing it in order to prevent ideas from spreading. He was doing it knowing very well that the ideas of the Quran have spread far and wide and are not difficult to discover. He was doing it in order to draw attention to those ideas and to make people realize exactly how incendiary a book the Quran is, and how it can lead people to think that they can murder and rape and do other outrageous offenses against other human beings and think that they're righteous and pleasing God. And so he was calling attention to all that. And the media should have been saying, look how heroic this man is. Look what a great man has come into our midst in order to alert us to this great threat that is manifest over 1400 years and consistent everywhere it goes. And it's not going to be any different in Sweden or anywhere else in the West. And instead, they vilified him, they mocked him, they ridiculed him, they demonized him, they stigmatized him, they marginalized him, and they tried to silence him, and now they are complicit in his murder.
Do you feel or believe that there will be any sort of impact on Sweden, the murder of Salwan Momika?
No, I don't think so. I think Sweden's done for. I think Sweden is on its way to cultural suicide, and that this is just one of the markers that historians later will say, how did Sweden die? Sweden was such a fine place. Sweden in the 1970s was something taught in American textbooks that I read in school, saying that's the model of a great society that we ought to strive for, because of course the textbooks were written by socialist internationalists. Well, now the socialist internationalists have destroyed Sweden, and they're not turning back. And Sweden will be gone, and there will be an Arab Sharia state in its place, with the Swedes, the native Swedes, subjugated under its rule. And nobody should shed a tear for them because they brought it upon themselves, and they want it, and they love it. Let them have it.
Could it have any effect on Europe?
On Europe?
Mm.
Oh, absolutely. It's just, Sweden's just doing it first. They're innovating. They're in the vanguard. How proud they must be. The Europeans all as a whole will follow quickly. Britain in particular, they're already jailing people who make fun. You know, they were chanting, Allah, Allah, who the F is Allah? And they're in prison for it. All right, so Britain will follow the same pathway, and so will Germany and France. And this will be the handiwork and the natural outcome of the internationalist policies that the European governments and the European Union have followed.
You've expressed it very clearly already, but Sweden is meant to have a party that is supposedly somewhat Islam critical. So why would something like this still happen?
Well, I know those guys, the Sweden Democrats. I spoke for them in Stockholm years ago, and but long before they had any role in the and when it was inconceivable that they would have any role in the government. And of course, people say, "Oh, look, they're Nazis," and so they don't want to have anything to do with them. And the Sweden Democrats, in order to try to move more toward a position where they can have influence, have in the same way watered down their own principles and been willing to say, "Well, all right, we'll go along with this or that." And so, who's speaking up for Sweden? Who's speaking up for the Swedes? I don't need to criticize the Sweden Democrats. They're the only hope you've got. But they're not in power. I mean, they're not, they should be in sole control of the government, and they're not. Why not? Because so many people are afraid. Oh, my goodness, it would be racist to vote for them. All right, so it's on your going to be on your tombstone as a nation. At least we weren't racist. Congratulations.
You mentioned this narrative a lot, the fear of being racist. How dangerous is this fear?
It's dangerous to the point of death. How dangerous is that? It's dangerous to the point of a nation committing national suicide. It's happening in Sweden. It's happening in Britain. It's happening elsewhere also. The Swedes are afraid of the Sweden Democrats, the Swedes who vote for the other parties, because they think, oh, look, they're going to bring back ethno-nationalism. And this is this is something we should resist. Why? What's wrong with it exactly? Nobody says a word if somebody says Bangladesh for the Bangladeshis, or Congo for the Congolese, or Mozambique for the Mozambicans. Nobody bats an eye. Nobody says, "Oh no, you have to take in all manner of non-Congolese and let them take a role in your society and ultimately overwhelm you demographically." Nobody's requiring that of any nations except those of the West. Because the socialist internationalists know if they destroy the Western nations, the others will fall into line.
So bringing it back to what happened to Salwan Momika, were you surprised that this was the outcome?
I'm not surprised. I'm enraged. This was a long time coming. I was enraged when he was put on trial instead of being given a security detail. I was enraged when they tried to deport him instead of saying, "You are a hero of modern Sweden and we are grateful to you." I'm not surprised. No, this was going to happen, but it was going to happen because of the terrible actions of the Swedish government, and they're criminals, and they ought to be treated as such, but of course they will not be.
So is there any hope that Sweden can turn the developments around?
Yes, there's always hope. Yes, if today they remove the government, today, and close the border, today, and deport all the illegal migrants, today, and then review the citizenship of everyone who has been granted it over the last 10 or 15 years, and investigate them all for their loyalty to the principles of Swedish society as it was constituted before this influx. And if they do all that, and they elect a government that is resolute in its pursuit of the defense and the survival of Sweden as it has been known historically, then they have a chance. But they will not do those things, and so Sweden will die.
Thank you very much, Robert Spencer, director of jihadwatch.org, for your participation today.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching RIX.